Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Walter Kennedy. I am the coordinator here at Morgan State University for the B.E.A.R.S program. And we are excited to have you at our monthly Student Success Night. It is 42 people in the room, and we probably still have more people coming on tonight. You guys are in for a treat on tonight. I'm so serious. You all are in for a treat. I hope you guys saw the flyer. I hope you liked the intro. And we are going to be very, very interactive on tonight. Our speaker is ready to be interactive. So please turn on your cameras if you can. Unmute your mic when you can, when you ask questions. This is like a hot topic to talk about. When you get a job, and when you get that job offer, what do you do next? When they offer you that $55,000 or that $70,000, is it worth it? Or should you say no deal, right? So we're excited. I'm going to hand it over to my supervisor, Mr. Clayton Lewis, who is the director of B.E.A.R.S, and he is going to introduce our speaker for tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, and welcome all our students, our mentors. We want to welcome even our engineering students and our engineering family. We have Mr. Larry Wilkerson and his staff online from the School of Engineering as well, because we're one family. So tonight, as Mr. Kennedy mentioned, it's a really, really special night. We have a lot of opportunities coming our way, specifically with this whole Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of companies are throwing money at HBCUs and providing different opportunities for us. And believe it or not, we have students that are have to juggle multiple opportunities. So no longer are we just scrambling to find one research, internship, externship opportunities, but some students actually have several different opportunities that they have to manage. So tonight, we have a special guest, Mr. Terrance Bowman. Both Mr. Larry Wilkerson and myself has been working with Terrance over the last couple years. Actually, I was introduced to Terrance through Mr. Larry Wilkerson, who is over in engineering. He coordinates their internships, employer partnerships over there. And I can tell you that Terrance, in addition to his position at JP Morgan Chase, he has a heart to ensure that students succeed. Not only, and I'll read his bio in a second, but just a little background. Not only is Terrance well accomplished, but he is very well versed in the art of the deal. Terrance has created opportunities for our students in STEM. He's been on the hiring side, he's been on the managing side, he's been on the technical training side, he's been on the research side. So you want to pay attention, you want to take out your notebooks on tonight and just absorb as much as you can from this gentleman on tonight. A little bit more about him. Terrance Bowman is the head of global technology, diversity, attraction, communities, and inclusion strategy for JP Morgan Chase and Company. And he is directly responsible for collaborating with both internal and external partners to develop strategies to attract diverse top talent. And who is that? That's you, because most of these companies are predominantly white, and Terrance has really devoted his energies, his skills to really helping to diversify, all right, that whole employment pool. So Terrance joined JP Morgan Chase back in 2005, where he worked for several years as a senior technical operations lead for the corporate internet group, and was responsible for delivering several critical database migrations, credit card and mobile applications, and a host of other infrastructural projects. Before joining JP Morgan Chase, Terrance was a software engineer himself. He was a software engineer manager, all right, at Accenture, and he was the head of diversity employee networking groups for the Philadelphia office. Currently, Terrance is residing in Delaware. He's a native of Chester, PA, all right, representing. Are you, we'll find out if he's a Steelers fan. We'll find out, because this is Ravens Nation down here. We still love him though. But anyway, Terrance currently resides in Newcastle, Delaware with his wife and 2 sons. So listen, I'm super excited. Again, get your pen and your paper out to welcome none other than Mr. Terrance Bowman. Terrance, welcome to the Morgan family once more. Welcome to the engineering and STEM family, man. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis, for inviting me to this session here tonight. I am no stranger to Morgan State, and I do thoroughly enjoy my time down there in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm so looking forward to those days when we can get back together physically in person. I got really nostalgic in the video when it was showing when we were actually at our last technology pop-up on campus. So that was fun to see that. And so I'm looking forward to that. I am not I am a Ravens fan, but I am a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan. So I'm from Chester, Pennsylvania. So if there are any Chesterites in the house that are here from Morgan State, shout out to all of you on the line. But as Mr. Lewis alluded to, like, I've been working for several years with Morgan State University, way before, a lot of the civil unrest happened last year, and really investing a lot of my time to pour back into students, to pour back into the university, and to create pathways for real opportunity, not just for show, but for a longevity. And because of that, we have a very decent alumni base of Bears that are at JP Morgan Chase, out of our Delaware office, Plano, Texas, Columbus, Ohio, Houston, Chicago. Almost every one of our tech centers within within our nation, we have Bears that are roaming free and doing great things in software engineering, infrastructure, cybersecurity, and a number of different roles within the organization. So I'm indeed happy to be here tonight. Tonight is going to be a little bit different maybe for some of you, because I have no slides at all. So the conversation that we're going to have is going to be very interactive. It's going to be a lot about what you want to hear and what you want to know and what I have to offer as a part of this. And it does come, with a long-standing experience in this space personally, but then on the other side as a hiring manager, and as well as, coming from a diversity lens that we're looking at it from today. But really quick, I want to just give a shout out to Nyla Thompson, Matthew Watkins, and Aya, who were the first people to turn on their cameras tonight. So you're going to get a nice giveaway from JP Morgan Chase just for that small amount of participation. So thank you for that. And we're going to jump right in. So tonight's topic was pretty interesting when I heard about what it was going to be. So this being Success Night, you think about success in a lot of different ways, right? Success can be measured in a lot of different ways. And I just want to pose it out to someone on the call. Just come off of mute. Tell me what success means to you. You're at Morgan State. You're majoring in STEM, some type of discipline across the board, whether it be in science or engineering or math, or the arts, things of that nature. Tell me what your idea of success means, because that will help craft our conversation as we talk about what is meant to be, whether it is a deal or no deal for you. So this is your first, come on off.
So I guess I'll go ahead. So when I think of success, I think of achieving your goals and doing the things that you want to do. I think of really just setting out to do something and shooting high, and just continuing to reach. But also I would say success is when you feel content with the things that you have done, with the things that you have put forth, and with what you have learned as well along the way.
Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to share?
I think that success is kind of based on essentially earning a career in the area you want, and also have like a stable kind of income where you don't like worry about, possibly, losing your job or just being stable in general.
Okay.
Sorry, could I add in?
Sure.
I feel like success, because it can deal with such a broad topic. I feel like for me, success is my necessities being met. Like, you know, I have food, I have clothes, I have, you know, shelter, my rent's paid. But I think it also takes it a step further to kind of be fulfilled in what you're doing. Because a lot of people can be successful in their careers per se on paper and be getting promotions, but they're not necessarily fulfilled in their careers. So I personally equate success to happiness.
That's great. So thank you for those, and we can definitely chime in, you know, as we continue this conversation. But one of the things that I like about what was shared was that we talked about fulfillment, we talked about a career, we talked about reaching goals, feeling satisfaction, that happiness, being stable, and just overall satisfaction, right? What I like about that is it's an introspective look at what success means. Nobody said that they wanted to be filthy rich. Nobody said that they wanted to ball out of control. Nobody said that they had to have, you know, the latest this or the latest that. And so that says to me that you're already thinking in the right direction. Now, what we have to be sure about is when we start getting to the conversation around offers and like the actual deal or no deal, that some of those other things don't creep in and cloud your judgment back to the things that we said were pivotal into acquiring success. So let's hold on that for a second and let's just talk about, you know, some of the things that that you just mentioned. Now, in order to even have a deal on the table, you have to actually do well in an interview process, right? So whether that interview or that process is for going back to grad school or becoming a teacher or getting a corporate job or a private sector job or nonprofit, there is always an interview process, right? And that is typically several stages. It is going to be a combination of behavioral types of interviews as well as technical interviews. And behavioral types of interviews, you know, are pretty standard and you're probably very used to them. Very open-ended questions where they ask you, tell me about a time where you know, faced difficult leadership or you were in danger of missing a deadline or you had to work with difficult people, things of that nature, right? Where you can demonstrate leadership, teamwork, your adaptability, your ability to learn, right? The other thing is knowing what you're interviewing for, right? That lets a company or the interviewer know that you've done your research, you're really excited about the position, and you know exactly what you're going to be getting yourself into. The flip side is also the technical interview. Now, depending on what type of position you're going after, right, that technical interview can vary. So if you're in mathematical, a mathematical type of or statistics type of role, you may have, you know, some questions related to that. Or if it's, you know, more swayed towards engineering, you're going to have some technical interviews that will dive into some of your prowess around engineering concepts and being able to solve problems. If it's more software engineering perspective, then it's going to be more around coding, right? So being able to practice in advance is going to help you prepare for those interviews and help you knock it out the park. The other key thing that some students may get tripped up on in this virtual world is you still need to dress for success. So I know we're in a Zoom world, but you still need to, you know, come to that interview professional. Even some of the tech companies are pretty casual, so you don't need to necessarily wear a suit, but you should always ask what the expectation is in terms of dress. But you always want to be, you know, as professionally dressed and groomed as possible. Make sure your lighting is decent. Make sure your microphone works pretty well. Make sure there's no distractions, and just carve out the time so that you can be dedicated, focused, and present in that interview. And certainly from the waist up, you can look, you know, as presentable as you need to. And certainly, you know, in this Zoom world, it may be a party on the bottom, right? No problem, but just make sure that your camera is focused in the right direction. There's not a whole lot of things going on that's going to distract the person from that standpoint. Now, at the time that you're interviewing, you may be interviewing for an internship or a full-time opportunity. So definitely understand the difference between the two. Definitely make sure as you're asking some of these questions, and the reason why I'm going over some of this is because this actually gets into the deal piece of it, because you can do a lot of the work up front as you're going through the interview process, because The interview process is just as much about interviewing the company and those people and the culture as it is for them to interview you. And so that is why it's so important that as you're going through every stage of the interview process, you have a set list of thoughtful questions that you're going to ask each of your interviewers. You want to know about the culture of the organization. You want to know about their commitment to diversity and inclusion. You want to know about, what has their relationship been with, Morgan State University. You want to understand, like, what is the general career projection for someone coming in new to that company. You want to understand, like, what keeps that person at that job for so long, right? Those are the types of questions that you want to ask to make sure that you understand what the company is about. What does a day in the life look like, right? What are some things that you could do to better prepare for that first day of work, to prepare for the internship? And one of the biggest questions this year is this internship virtual or in person or hybrid, right? Is the full-time opportunity going to be in that location, or is there flexibility given the current pandemic state? A lot of great questions that maybe even weren't as relevant, 2 years ago. And there is a lot of more flexibility now in terms of location because of where we are with the pandemic and people not fully opening their offices back up, and certainly the uncertainty of what lies ahead with additional health concerns. So bring your best self to all of these interviews. Make sure you're asking the right questions so that you can understand what is going to be the best decision once you finally do get an offer. So in addition to the culture, in addition to commitment to D&I, you want to talk about, what does that plan to reopen look like? So if they're still remote, right, you want to understand, like, when would you be expected to move, right? If that position did open up for you. And the greatest thing to do is to get the interviewer to talk about themselves, right? You can get them to talk about their career, to make that personal connection with you. And then based on what they say, that might spark another question and show that you were really in tune with what was going on. So those are just some quick tips before we dive into the deal aspect. But any questions just in general about the overall interview process, the remote nature of interviews, and how that works before we move on? The one thing that I will say, just because there are so many platforms out there, make sure you understand which platform is going to be used. So whether it's Zoom, WebEx, Google Hangout, or some other platform, make sure you go in advance to test the platform. Make sure that you can test your mic, your camera, and all those things to ensure that you're not going to have any hiccups the day of. If they're going to be expecting you to do, like, let's say, whiteboarding or sharing your screen, test out those capabilities in addition to just the basic camera operations and the microphone operations. Make sure that if you haven't done like a shared screen, that you test that, but also if you're going to be doing some collaborative type of work in a technical interview, make sure that you practice that as well. If you're going to be doing a coding exercise, make sure that you go through the motions of being able to do some of those things in advance as well. Those things are pretty critical. And if they ask you to do pre-work, be prepared to speak about all of those things during the actual interview itself, because all of those things are fair game as it relates to being assessed for that current opportunity. Any questions about the overall interview process?
So I did have a question. What are some examples of ways we can get the interviewer to talk about themselves?
So one of the great ways of talking about getting interviewer to talk about themselves is asking them about what their current responsibilities are, or how long they've been with the organization, and how have they seen their career progress over time. Or, what is some advice, that they would give to their younger self as they started their career with JP Morgan Chase or whatever the company might be. Any other questions?
I do have a question. So I know there are some students that may be parents. Is it okay to like let the employer know, like, hey, I have children around, like What's the basis for that? Because I know sometimes you should be in a quiet space, and then you have family around also too. So what's the basis for children most of the time?
Yeah, so I would agree that, when at all possible, to make, arrangements for the children to be, off camera and occupied so that you can really focus on the interview. But we've all been through it. I'm a working parent myself, so there have been times that my kids have burst in and have, shown themselves on camera and things of that nature. Now, if this happens to you, right, don't panic, to the point where you lose your composure and things of that nature. Simply apologize to the interviewer. Ask them if you can have a minute to just redirect, your child, so that you can come back and focus. And it really shouldn't be a problem because we all are dealing with, the similar types of work arrangements, and quarters may be tight, right, in terms of how you're able to do it. But as much as you can prepare in advance for that, is going to be as helpful as possible. So if you know that at a certain point in time that your child is going to require your assistance, or you're not going to have assistance at home during that time frame, pick another time, right, that you can, focus a little bit more of your efforts one-on-one with the interviewer. Any other questions before we go to the next phase of this process?
I have a question about technical interviews. So if you go to an interview and they might ask you to like show your skills, is there a way you can ask before the interview so you know what you should brush up upon before you go in and do any technical exercise?
Absolutely. So that is one of the first questions that you should ask your recruiter, who is going to be setting you up with the interview. So it could be a recruiter, it could be a hiring manager, or a recruiting coordinator. You want to ask them, what to expect in the interview. If they say, a technical interview, you do want to ask, is it going to be hands-on? Am I going to be sharing my screen? Am I going to be expected to write actual lines of code, or is this going to be pseudocode? What is the actual process? Some companies will ask you to complete a coding exercise in advance. So you will submit that even before the interview. And you want to make sure that you have, documented that yourself so that you remember what those questions were, because those questions can come back up during the interview, especially let's say if you had a challenge with one of them, they may want you to step them through your thought process and hopefully arrive at a better solution during the actual interview. Does that help?
Yes.
All right. So let's move on to things go well and you're moving through the interview process. One of the things that you always want to make sure that you understand as much as possible, what are the next steps? So at the end of, a round of interviews, whether it be with the hiring manager or a business representative or the recruiter, you want to always ask, when should I expect to hear back? Or what are the next steps in the timeline for this process? Because that way you minimize the anxiety that you create for yourself after the interview, because you're always wondering in your mind, oh my God, did they go well? Did it not go well? If you don't hear back from them in a week, like, should you start to panic? Should you be reaching out? Well, if they already told you that you're going to hear back between 7 and 10 days, you should not start to fret, on day 7, right? Or even day 8. And even if they don't get back to you on day 10, please, you should definitely allow them for, day 11 before you go and follow up, right? Because usually they're pretty good about that timeline, and then they will give you, contact information to be able to reach out should you have any questions. And that's another way to say, stay engaged, right? Can I contact you? Should I have any questions, throughout this process? That way you still have a lifeline and don't feel like you're in a dark hole as it relates to the next steps. So once you actually get through the process and there's an offer on the table, you typically are going to get 2 forms of communication. Usually you'll get a verbal communication from a recruiter. There will probably be a verbal offer. Congratulations, you did really well in your interviews. We want to offer you this role in this position. in this location, and we're going to follow up with an offer letter. Usually they will say the offer letter will come, within this amount of time from this conversation. When you get it, read it over and let me know if you have any questions. So that conversation will typically follow with an offer letter. And then that's what jumpstarts this whole process, right? So who can tell me what is actually contained within an offer letter? Like what's in there?
I can. It should be like how much you'll be making per hour, any benefits that they offer, any healthcare, and things like that.
Okay. Now, before we even talk about more details around the offer letter, typically the offer letters, right, will need to be agreed upon by a certain period of time. So what does that actually make that offer letter? Like, so when you sign that offer letter, what is that? What is that actually?
Contract.
It's a contract, right? It's an agreement between you and a company or a school or an institution or a hiring body that you say, I agree to everything in this offer letter, and here's my name and my signature. Now, I specify, and I'm going to emphasize, you agree with everything in the offer letter, right? So it doesn't say that I skipped page 3 because I saw the money on page 1 and it looked good, so I'm going to just sign it. No, right? You agree to everything in that offer letter, even the fine print. And so that is a contract between you and that company. And I mentioned that because you need to understand that before you sign, because it gets really complicated after you sign, right? You're locked in. So yes, I agree with you. It should contain the salary expectations, and amounts, so whether it's an hourly rate or if it's a salary. And some people think that only like internships can be hourly, but your full-time position, depending on the type of position, could be hourly as well. Or you could have a salary, but be eligible for overtime, right? So that's a key thing to understand too. Like if you're going to be working more than 40 hours a week, that's a very different financial package from somebody that's not getting overtime versus somebody who's getting a salary plus overtime, right? And that's one of the things that you would ask, like either during the interview process or at the deal, no deal stage is, would I be expected to work overtime? Because it might not matter, right? If you're only going to be working, 1 or 2 hours every now and then. But if you're going to be expected to work overtime every single week, just based on the nature of your job or nights and weekends, or you're going to be on call and things of that nature, like those are some very important things to consider, because you might be working those hours in one organization, but not getting paid for them. And in another organization, you are getting paid for them. And that can be very taxing on, your body. It's taking away from, your personal time. So you want to be sure you understand what that means. You want to also know if there is a sign-on bonus, right? Is this company going to offer any upfront funding to be able to help you move or relocate or purchase any office equipment or hardware or software that you need to be productive in your role? So is there a sign-on bonus associated with this? Now, the important part of negotiation is understanding what you can negotiate and what you can't negotiate. So what I will tell you, for most entry-level positions, depending on how they're organized, some of them are not negotiable because it's a program offer. So as an example, we have a software engineering program, and the offers that you receive for that program are typically not negotiable because everyone coming in to those programs are making the same amount of money for that particular location, for that particular position. And so it's not negotiable, right, for those roles. And so that's important to understand because, if you're trying to negotiate for a position that's, for an offer that's not really negotiable, then that shows that you didn't really understand that this was a program offer. Now, if it's outside of that And you can simply ask the recruiter, right? You know, are these terms negotiable? And they will clearly tell you yes or no, or if there's certain parts of it that are or are not, right? But none of you are worried about, like, you know, all that money, because we talked about, you know, necessity, career, happiness, fulfillment, and all those wonderful things that Morgan State is training you to be successful in, right? That's not going to be the make or break for what you're going to do. The other thing when it comes to salary, especially if you're weighing two offers together, location makes a big deal, like makes a big difference. So if you are assessing a salary of, let's say, $75,000 in Plano, Texas versus $75,000 in New York City, which one is probably a better financial package just at a base salary perspective?
75 in Plano.
75 in Plano. Why is that though?
Because 75 in New York is not going to get you anywhere. It's the cost of living is much higher in New York, and New York is a highly populated area, and there's a lot kind of going on, as opposed to in Texas, where it's a lot more rural, and it's like property doesn't cost as much in Texas.
You got that right. It's nowhere near as expensive as New York City. So you think about $75,000 in New York City, you will likely, depending on where you live, be living check to check. Like, you're going to pay thousands of dollars, right, for a studio apartment that you're going to be able to touch all walls with your hands, like out like this. And you're going to be really strapped, right? When you think about that versus Plano, Texas, right? That the cost of living is much lower. You'll be able to have affordable housing and a lot of other things. But at the same time, there's other factors. Well, what if I'm from New York and, like, that's really where I want to be? Well, that's a judgment call, right? So you're going to have to make some decisions. That means you're not going to be living in the city, right? You may be living on the outskirts in Jersey, or you may decide that maybe you go back and live with your parents or family, right, for that first couple of years, so that you can stack your money to be able to afford something, and really elevate, you know, your savings and things of that nature. So it really does depend the location. So you can't just take a salary, or, you know, even if it was $85,000 in New York versus 75 in Plano, that 75 in Plano is still going to go a long way. And so you just need to think about, you know, your overall, you know, standard of living that you want to have, you know, what your overall goals are, the type of position as well, right? Maybe the position in Plano might be better than the position in New York, or vice versa, right? The career trajectory for the one in one location is better. You want to understand those types of things as well. We also talked about benefits, right? So benefits are important. You know, it's something that, you know, a lot of new hires overlook, because either they have not had to worry about healthcare or pay for their own healthcare in the past, but this is something that's going to be on you, right? So you want to go to the doctor, you want to get your teeth cleaned, you want to, you know, buy a new pair of glasses and get your annual exams and things of that nature. Like, that is covered in a benefits package, right? And you want to make sure that those benefits start, you know, as soon as you're starting that job, right? You don't want to necessarily have to wait months down the line, because if something happens, you're going to have to pay out of pocket. And your offer letter probably told you that, but if you didn't read it, you wouldn't know. And so that's another thing to consider, like benefits starting immediately versus benefits starting down the line, right? Weighing that into your decision. Do you get vacation days immediately, right? One company may give you 2 weeks to start. Another company may give you 3 weeks. That's a whole extra week of paid time off. Do you also get sick days, right? Do you get personal days? Do you get, you know, holidays, as well as all those other things that are baked into? Is that time off flexible, right? Do you have to be there for a certain period of time before you get any vacation vested? Are you going to be eligible for a bonus, right? Within your first year? Things like that are put into that plan. Tuition reimbursement. You know, do you want to go back to school and get like a master's or eventually a PhD? Does this company offer tuition reimbursement or tuition forgiveness? Do they have a partnership with other universities that provide, you know, teaching to employees on site or virtual learning, things of that nature? All those things need to be thought about when you're thinking about, you know, do I take this deal or not? So that's why I say you can never make it about the money, especially for your first job out the gate, because the money will come, the money will follow, right? And, you know, let's face it, you're not used to making a lot of money right now. So it's really about an informed decision on where do I want to go? Where do I see myself advancing in my career? Where can I really grow and learn, you know, as a professional? So do have a thorough understanding. And nowadays there's so many online tools that you can look at to see if there's you know, a benchmark that you compare to. So a lot of people use like Glassdoor. They ask other students that work for those companies, or ask people like Mr. Lewis or Mr. Wilkinson to give some advice, right? You have your own board of directors for your career. Like, you are the CEO and you have people, your trusted advisors, that can help you. So whether it be family, friends, you know, school advisors, professors, people that have been with you through this journey, probably some of the same people who help you choose your major or help you choose Morgan State over other universities. It's the same type of mentality that you're going to take for your career. So bouncing those types of ideas and those scenarios off those people is quite helpful. So think about that, do your research. If for some reason, you know, that deadline that is also in your offer letter cannot be met, make sure you reach out to your recruiter as soon as possible to see if they can grant you an extension. See if they can grant you an extension for that offer, because maybe you're trying to weigh a couple different offers, or maybe you're waiting on another company to make those decisions. But ask for that extension. Don't wait until the day of. Don't wait until that deadline has passed to say, oh, can I get another week, right? Because that shows that you're, at least from their perspective, that you're not really planning ahead, that you're not really, you know, valuing their time as much as they're valuing your time. And definitely be realistic, right? Because they're balancing the number of roles that they have for their the students at Morgan State with timelines that they need to fill. So you're not going to ask them for like 6 months extension, right? That's not reasonable, right? But a couple weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever you need, because you're also weighing, you know, those decisions. Make sure you understand that. And also be sure that you check with, you know, your student success advisors and career services, because your university probably also has guidelines that companies need to follow in terms of offer decisions and making sure that they give you enough time. So make sure you understand that as well. So if your school states that you need to have X amount of time, most companies will honor, well, all companies will honor whatever school guidelines that are there. So I said a lot about the actual offer itself. You must have questions, or if you have offers on the table right now and you want to ask questions, you don't have to get into specifics, or you've had offers in the past and you ran into some snags. This is a good time to pause and to see what questions you might have there.
So I have a question.
Sure.
It was really about what you said in the fine print. When you say that, like, what are some red flags we should look for, like specifically, if you could do that?
So, and it's not necessarily red flags, it's just information, right? And it may not be in fine print, it's probably in the same font, but I say that because a lot of times people don't get to those other pages, and some of those things are around like the benefits and when they kick in, or if you get a sign-on bonus, but you quit the firm within X amount of time, you owe them X percentage back, right? Or, you know, that your income is taxed based on this, you know, or your overtime pay will kick in after a certain point, or if you get a bonus, it's going to be taxed as a bonus and not like as regular pay, or you are not eligible for tuition reimbursement until after a full year of service, right? Or it has to be in a certain line of a line of study, right? So it's just little things like that that sometimes are not huge deals, but it could be a deal breaker for you if you wanted to pursue something different, or if it didn't match up to where you thought, you were thinking, or if that other company did not have those same stipulations, but it was a fairly comparable offer. Does that help?
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
So Terrence, I just wanted to reinforce what you were just saying. Sometimes it's not a matter of it being hidden, but just a matter of us being our own advocate and making sure that we take due diligence to actually read a contract. Sometimes people are either bashful or intimidated about all the writing, and they just don't want, they skim and don't look very carefully. Um, I'm not a student myself. I've been in the workforce for a really long time. But I came to your talk today because this is really invaluable. And I knew you'd be offering information it's not taught, So some of this I had to learn with bumps along the way. But one of my own personal experiences years ago is just, I was so used to working jobs that offered benefits to me. I assumed that I would be getting the benefits. And then when I got the offer letter, I noticed the benefits were not there. So I had to follow up and ask more questions before I signed it. Hey, am I missing something? Because I didn't see it. And they said, no, we don't offer it. And that was a deal breaker. And had I foolishly just signed away thinking, that it was going to be there, I would have really done myself harm down the line. And yeah, who knows what that outcome would have been. So definitely reading fine print, and don't be shy, about taking your time with it and asking others for help if you think you can't do it.
And thanks for mentioning that, because some people will just assume that you're going to get benefits, right? But that's not always the case. The other thing to ask around benefits is, how it is paid for, because some companies, have a really good benefit package where they actually pay for employees' benefits, or a large portion of them, whereas some people, will have to pay a portion of their salary, and it comes out of your paycheck every single check, that you elect for those benefits to come out of your salary pay. So those are very good questions to ask, as it relates to the benefits. And it usually is documented in there, but you have to go and read it. It's not going to be on the first page. More than likely, you'll have to continue reading the contract. What other questions?
I have one. So I guess you were talking about the money piece. So what is too much? So if I go on Glassdoor and I see like the minimum that they're paying is 50,000, and I know like I've had a job before that was paying me 70. Um, with that $50,000, like where can I go? Like, can I go 5,000 more? How much can I push the bucket? Or is it worth? I mean, can I push the bucket for my worth, or should I just look at like all the benefits that come along with it and just keep that 50,000?
Yeah. So one of the key things, right, about that is, asking yourself, like, would $5,000 really make or break this deal? And another clarifying question as a part of this whole process would be, what is the typical salary adjustment or salary increase that one might expect to receive on an annual basis? Because if that amount would change and surpass that $5,000 after the first year, would you really need to do that with this particular company if you know this is where you want to be? Is it going to really be worth it once you break that $5,000 down over 12 months, minus the tax, minus everything else? But this is really where your heart is, right? Also understanding that, Glassdoor and some of these other sites that are out there, and even the internet, it's always not as accurate down to the dollar, right? And you don't always know, is it in the same location that you're thinking about, and all those other factors within there, right? So there's so many layers to understanding like how far to go, but you want to make an informed decision and give it more of a range. right? If you're asked like what range you would like to be in, it's better to have a range so that you don't completely wipe yourself out. Because if their range was 50 to 60, right? And you say, I want 70, then they're like, there's no way we can even meet his expectations. And so they may back off because they're not even going to insult you. Meanwhile, you're like, I would take 60, I would take 65, right? But you told them 70. And they found, you know, other people that would be fine with 60 or 55 along the way. So understand, like, you're sometimes competing with yourself in addition to competing with other candidates, if that makes sense. All right. Was there another question? I think I saw someone that came off of mute that had another question. All right.
I do have one more follow-up. So how much time is too much time when given an offer? Like if I tell the employer, hey, I need some time to think about it, like how much time is too much?
So usually that really depends on where they are in the recruiting process. What I will say is you have more flexibility in the fall than you do in the spring. So in the fall, companies will go out with early offers to interns from that summer. And they're like, you know, we want to have you back. We understand like you're not even back in school yet, but we'll give you 6 weeks, you know, to decide. That will give them, you know, a whole month and a half back at school to kind of figure out if they want to take the offer and things of that nature. Same with full time. They will typically give you 2 weeks to like a month and things of that nature. But the challenge is now, like now that we're in the spring, you're not going to have as much flexibility because companies are now trying to finalize that class. They're trying to finalize if they still have internships available. They're quickly trying to close that out because they have to lock it in and start the onboarding process. So what I will say, you have less flexibility now. So if they tell you 2 to 3 weeks, it's probably closer to 2 to 3 weeks because every other company is going to be right along that time frame because they need to lock in, start the onboarding process, background checks, fingerprinting, and get people set up in the systems. Because what happens is they now need to make sure that they have filled their class so that every hiring manager will get the interns or the full-time hires that they're going to be expecting in June, July timeframe. So be cognizant of that as well. So one thing I wanted to touch on before because I want to make sure we don't lose time here, is what if you accepted an offer back in the fall, but let's say you get another offer like in January that is really compelling. Like, what do you do? Right? Now, the same process remains. Just because it is more money doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better offer. Financially, it might sound like it, but you have to go through the same rigor that you went through before to assess this offer, especially because now what you're going to do is you're going to be essentially potentially breaking a contract with an employer because you've told them you've accepted this position and you agree to these terms and they have locked you in, but now you're going to renege on that and go somewhere else. So the same process you went through, understanding the salary, the location, the benefits, the career trajectory, the advancement opportunities, the yearly promotions, the bonuses, and all those types of things, and managing that with your personal board of the board of directors for your personal brand to come up with a decision. Does this even make sense? In some conditions, some situations you're like, nope, I'm going to stick with this offer. This is fair. Like, this is what I want to do. Other situations, you're like, wow, like this is a once in a lifetime chance. I don't want to miss out on this opportunity. You've weighed the options, and it may not even be about money. It may be exactly the same, or maybe the other one just has a better trajectory, or it's more in line with what you want to do for your own personal and professional happiness. And so it may be less money, but it might be the right thing for you to do. So what do you do in that situation? The one thing you want to do is act as quickly as possible because you want to be as respectful and engaging with the employer as you possibly can. So if you decide not to take the offer, that's an easy one. You just tell the new company or the new offer that, respectfully, you're going to have to decline that offer. You're going to stick with a previous offer. But let's say you want to go with that newer offer. What you would need to do is be very tactful in your approach, and you want to make sure that you reach out to your recruiter that you've been talking to or hiring manager to let them know the circumstance, and be very thoughtful about how you approach that. That an unexpected offer came your way, that you really want to pursue because of XYZ. Don't be very verbose and long and drawn out, but you want to be respectful to not let them know that you didn't want to have it come to that, but this is a better fit. Now, you want to make sure that you kind of keep the language very very professional, of course, but also hopefully leaving some segue for future conversations if for some reason you want to come back to the company down the line and things of that nature, because the last thing you want to do is burn a bridge. The other thing that you have to be is apologetic, right? Because you basically took somebody's spot. And now that company will more than likely not be able to fill that spot because they've invested that time in you, and basically close their interview process. The second thing you want to do is make sure you reach out to those relationship managers at your school. So let's say it was for JP Morgan Chase, right? You want to give Mr. Lewis and Mr. Wilkerson a heads up. If you're engineering, Mr. Wilkerson, and in the College of Arts and Science, Computer Science, and Mathematics, you want to go to Mr. Lewis, because they manage the relationship with JP Morgan Chase. And the last thing they want to do is be sidelined, right? Or hit on the sidebar with, oh, did you know that two students from, computer science or engineering reneged on an offer? Like, we gave them that offer back in the fall, and they waited until, we were getting ready to onboard them to say that they're not coming, right? That creates a bad relationship, not necessarily immediately, but it's a perception of, how we're managing those relationships with the schools and with the companies. So if anything, make sure they get the heads up so that they can be proactive in reaching out to the company to massage those relationships, to make sure there's no ill feelings as it relates to that. Because that's a pretty big deal, especially when you're dealing with companies that are investing time and resources to the university. So making sure you're covering all aspects is going to be very, very important. But definitely want to make sure you're weighing all options before making that very tough decision. Any questions about that? No? Okay, so I want to make sure I have a couple minutes here. I'll open it up for any questions from the audience. It can be about what we discussed here tonight, or it can be anything in general. Happy to answer any questions you have for the next couple minutes.
I have a question. I'm not sure if somebody asked this because I think I heard something similar to it. But so when it comes to negotiating, like, there's always a starting salary. When it comes to negotiating, if you want, more than what's given, how do you know what's too much or what's too less? Like, you don't want to lowball yourself, but you also don't want to do too much.
Right. So one of the things we talked about is just making sure that you understand if the offer is negotiable or if it's a program offer. And that's kind of the language that most companies will use. If this is a direct hire position where it could potentially be negotiable, there's a lot of tools, whether it be on LinkedIn and Glassdoor, that will show you, some ranges that are pretty reliable. But I want to make sure that when you're looking at some of those ranges and you're doing your research, that you're comparing apples to apples. So you're comparing a New York position to a New York position versus New York and Delaware or New York and Plano, right? So you want to make sure that you're not asking for a New York range and you're going to a non-New York location. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. What other questions do you have?
So I have a question. It's kind of like around your coding, as like not coding, but like a software engineer's perspective. So when you went for your interview, did I'm trying to see how to word it. But when you went for your interview, did they tell you straight up like what they expected you to do, or like if they wanted you like to change your responsibilities? Since you like, you're usually starting like at the like entry level, you said, would they like offer, a raise or something, or like more responsibilities the longer you stay?
Right. Yeah. So usually with some of these program offers, especially for software engineering, you would come into a cohort, and so the cohort would be responsible for obviously coding, applications for that organization, but also they're getting technical training, professional training, and also support from a program management team that will help them guide their career. So they're getting the skills that they need so that they can progress every single year, and get more responsibility as they go, so that once they finish the program, they should be eligible for promotion to the next stage. And that's something that can be asked during the interview process, so that you understand what does that progression look like.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. If there's no other questions, I would just like to thank you for your time this evening. It has been a very quick hour, that's for sure. So thank you for being engaged and asking lots of questions and being interested in this very important topic. I will say it's very timely, because it is, many of you are approaching the end of the semester and thinking about where you're going to be this summer or full time, trying to weigh options in terms of locations and where you want to be, trying to navigate through this pandemic state of mind, this virtual environment, and really push through to come out on the other side and make the correct decision. So it's not an easy task, and I don't want you to think that it is. And layering in some of these nuances has made it even more difficult. But if you can follow some of those steps that we talked about here tonight, I think that you will come up with some logical decisions that you'll be happy, and you can reach that ultimate success factor that we talked about earlier. So that fulfillment, the happiness, the career, the the stability of life, and that life and work balance is what you want. You want to feel fulfilled and doing great work and contributing to overall success. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Lewis if you want anything else to say before we close out.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. This was a very, very important topic. If we can just, yes, I see some virtual applause. If we can just show Mr. Bowman some love on tonight with your virtual applause. I see a couple people in the chat saying thank you so much. Listen, success does not happen by accident. Success does not happen by accident. You have to understand, and tonight you got the inside scoop from someone who has not only been where you are, but continue to create opportunities for you all, for students that know intimately these different nuances that you must navigate. So hopefully you took some good notes. Before I wrap up, I see Larry is here. Larry, you want to share anything? I think you went back out. We can't hear you. Okay, we still
Trying to
can't.
find his mute button.
There you go.
I just want to thank Terrance again for giving us those words of wisdom. There are certainly some very important, especially this time of the year. We have these questions come up all the time, Terrance, so you answered them greatly. And I think we were really better educated about this process going forward. So I just want to thank you for taking the time out to do this. Thanks, Clayton, for inviting Schools of Engineering as well. And hopefully next time you come, Terrance, you'll be over on our network. over in the School of Engineering. So,
Awesome.
Sounds like a plan.
all right.
And that's how we do it. We tag team. So I love it.
Right.
So again, guys, we are committed to your success. And I'll say this and turn it back over to Mr. Kennedy. There is not enough of us who are in positions of influence and leverage. And as we, as our culture deem successful, that is actually reaching back and really reinvesting in the process and in the community. So these nights are really, really important to me. It's important to Mr. Wilkerson. I saw Dr. Poindexter on here. Thank you, Ms. Almaty, who's in physics. So listen, I don't care where you are, what field of study you're pursuing, what career pathway you are endeavoring to pursue. If you take these nuggets and you make sure that you verify information, that you read, that you tap into the team that's around you and the resources that's around you, guess what? You are going to be successful. Point blank, period. I am serious about your success. B.E.A.R.S, the whole mentorship team knows this. SCMNS knows this. Mr. Wilkerson, he doesn't have to be here, all right? He came back to give back to Morgan State University, but we need more educated young adults and millennials that are going out there, that's moving and shaking, but doing it professionally, doing it with wisdom and insight as to, listen, we want to take away every excuse for whether it's employers not to hire, researchers not to accept, or I don't care what field you are, we want to begin to take away those excuses from them. And we also want to empower you so that when you step into an interview room, that, listen, you understand your value. You understand the dynamics of what's going on. You understand the perception. All right. So that's why we're here. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And I'm so proud to share this opportunity with each and every one of you. Also to all the faculty and the staff that's on here, to our partners, and more importantly, to you, the students. Guess what? Get empowered. Let's be successful. We need you to be successful. All right. So with that said, much love from SCMNS, and as Mr. Wilkerson said, much love from School of Engineering. We love what we do, and we love you guys. All right. And we want you guys to be successful. So with that, Mr. Kennedy, I know you got some housekeeping things to do. Terrance, we're going to send you as well a nice little thank you package, so you can be expecting that from us. And we appreciate you, sir. Thank you for your investment in our community and specifically at Morgan State University. So thank you, Terrance. Back to you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bowman, I just want to say thank you. This is my first time meeting you and getting to know you and hearing you speak. It was very, very engaging, as you said it would be. I'm even getting texts from some of my mentors and students that said it was very, very engaging. So thank you for being engaging with the students and giving us some nuggets. I've been in the corporate world for almost 6 years. On the top of the ladder, top management. And I know as an employer that we don't give out those nuggets to employees that are coming in. Like, we try to, make sure we're giving them the lowest, amount ever, because we got a budget, right? So for you to come in here and really give us those nuggets that other employers would never give us, we appreciate that, seriously. So our students can be prepared to go out there and take on the world as leaders. Students and staff and visitors, if you can do me a favor, Jasmine has dropped a link. Jasmine, if you can do it one more time. Jasmine has dropped the link in the chat for the attendance. If you can click on that and just let us know if you're a staff member, if you're a student, if you're a visitor. We just want to capture everyone that was here today and make sure that you're accounted for. But we do appreciate everyone for coming out. Even if you are not a part of Peer-Bears, we appreciate you for coming out. I had many colleagues look at the flyer and were like, and was intrigued. They were like, deal or no deal? Like, I got to jump in that. Like, that's cool. So thank you for coming out. As you guys know, this is a monthly student success night. So be prepared. We got something great for you next month. We will be dropping the flyer very soon. So keep an eye out. If you don't follow us on Instagram, please follow us at Peer-Bears MSU on Instagram to stay up to date with everything Peer-Bears and with everything that's going on at Morgan State University. All right. Again, Mr. Bowman, thank you. Be looking out for a package from us, and I'll definitely follow up and send you an email as well.
All right. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Y'all do the same.